After 70, you no longer have to live the way you used to. But what should you let go of, and what's still worth holding on to? That question may sound simple, but if you're in your 70s or beyond, you know it's anything but. Life feels different now. The noise quiets, and in that stillness, clarity emerges. You begin to notice how some things that once felt so urgent, people's opinions, status, possessions, have lost their shine. That's not something to fear, it's something to embrace. You're not slowing down, you're waking up. You're stepping into what I call the golden era of life, a time to live on your terms, not by anyone else's standards. In this video, we're going to explore 9 things that no longer make sense after 70. Not just habits, but mindsets, emotional weights, obligations that drained your energy for years without you realizing it. Some of what you hear may surprise you, some might challenge you, and others will feel like the permission you've been waiting for your whole life. And if, during this journey, something hits home, if a truth stirs something in your chest, I want you to pause and type one word in the comments: release. Because identifying what's no longer serving you is the first step toward letting it go. And if you find this message resonates, please support this space by liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. The more we share, the more we help others find the strength to do the same. What you're about to hear isn't just advice. It's the distilled wisdom of working with older adults for over a decade. I've seen the beauty of what happens when people let go of what no longer fits. They don't just survive, they awaken. And it almost always starts with one quiet, courageous act: letting go of the weight of other people's opinions. That's where we begin. Because if you're still seeking approval, you're still in a cage. Let's open that door together. 1. Letting go of the weight of others' opinions. You've lived long enough to know that no one else's opinion can define your worth. So why are you still carrying their expectations like bricks in your pocket? For much of our lives, we are molded by the unspoken rules of what others expect of us. Be agreeable, look presentable, don't make waves. We often shape our decisions around the opinions of family, friends, society, even strangers. And for many seniors, that conditioning doesn't simply vanish with age. It lingers, quietly influencing everything from what we wear to how we spend our time. But after 70, one of the most liberating realizations you can come to is this: the only approval you ever truly needed was your own. I've worked with older adults for over a decade, and the emotional fatigue from people-pleasing is real. It saps energy, confidence, and joy. One of my clients, Grace, aged 73, once confided in me that she had spent her entire life avoiding conflict, afraid to disappoint. Only after her mother passed away did she finally realize she had never lived a day for herself. That simple, shocking awareness brought her both tears and relief. Letting go of the need for approval is not about becoming rude or indifferent. It's about returning to yourself. It's about replacing guilt with clarity and fear with strength. When you stop chasing validation, you begin choosing based on what nourishes you. You say no to invitations that drain you. You are what makes you feel alive, not what makes others comfortable. And most importantly, you trust your voice again, the one you buried for decades beneath layers of silence. This shift isn't easy, but it's transformational. The people who love you will stay, and those who expected you to shrink were never your people to begin with. So today, ask yourself honestly, whose approval are you still working for? Whose voice is louder than your own? And what might happen if you turned down that noise and finally listened inward? Because once you do, you'll begin to notice another kind of weight you've been carrying. Not just the weight of judgment, but the physical and emotional burden of things you've held on to in the name of image and identity. And now, it's time to talk about those things too, because letting go of material possessions isn't just practical, it's deeply freeing. 2. Releasing the burden of material possessions. There comes a point in life, often after 70, when we realize that the things we once believed we owned have quietly started owning us. Closets filled with clothes we no longer wear, shelves lined with trinkets from decades past, drawers stuffed with gadgets we forgot we even had. These objects were once symbols of success, comfort, even love. But now, they often sit silently, gathering dust and emotional weight. I've seen it time and again in my years working with older adults. When someone begins to declutter, they don't just clear physical space, they reclaim mental clarity. There's something deeply emotional about letting go of objects. We attach memories to them, A wedding dish becomes the last remnant of a relationship. A dress from the 80s carries echoes of who we once were. But here's the truth. Memories don't live in things, they live in us. You don't have to keep the sweater to honor the memory. You don't have to hold on to the bookshelf to prove you once read every page. The emotional liberation that comes from releasing the excess is real, and it's powerful. I once visited an 80-year-old man who downsized from a 3-bedroom home to a small studio. He told me he felt 20 pounds lighter, not physically, but spiritually. For the first time, he said, "My home looks like who I am now, not who I was." That shift, living for who you are today, not who you used to be, is one of the most overlooked forms of healing in older adulthood. When your environment reflects your current life, not a museum of the past, you create room for peace, for joy, for new memories yet to come. And no, this isn't about minimalism or being trendy. It's about being intentional. It's about removing the noise so you can hear what truly matters. So take a look around your space. What are you holding on to out of guilt? What's quietly draining your energy every time you walk past it? And what could it feel like to release just one thing today? Because when you begin to let go of the physical clutter, you'll often find you're also releasing emotional burdens you didn't even know you were carrying. And that makes way for something beautiful, the freedom to say yes only to what adds light to your life. Which brings us to the next truth. It's not just what you own that needs evaluating. It's also who and what you give your time to. 3. Saying no to unnecessary social obligations. There's a unique kind of exhaustion that comes from smiling through events you didn't want to attend, making small talk that drains your energy, or showing up out of guilt rather than genuine desire. And after 70, it's a weariness that becomes too heavy to ignore. For decades, many of us were taught that saying no was impolite, even selfish. So we said yes, out of habit, out of duty. We showed up for family gatherings, distant acquaintances, church groups, or neighbors' birthdays, not because we wanted to, but because we thought we had to. But here's the truth. After a certain age, time becomes your most sacred resource, and protecting it is not selfish, it's wise. I once counseled a 76-year-old woman who admitted she dreaded her weekly social calendar, but kept it full so people wouldn't think she was antisocial. I asked her one simple question. Do those events nourish you or deplete you? She paused, then whispered, "They empty me." That moment changed everything. We sat together and rewrote her weekly schedule, removing every obligation that didn't bring her joy. What followed was a remarkable transformation. Her anxiety reduced, her sleep improved, and for the first time in years, she had time to paint again. When you stop giving your time away out of obligation, you reclaim the energy to invest in what truly matters. Connection, not performance. This doesn't mean isolating yourself. It means being intentional about who you give your time, your presence, and your emotional bandwidth to. Your yes becomes more powerful when it's not diluted by dozens of empty commitments. You deserve to be present where you want to be, not where you're expected to be. And here's something beautiful. When you honor your own needs, you give others silent permission to do the same. So the next time you feel that familiar tug of guilt over declining an invitation, pause and ask yourself, is this for me or for them? If the answer is them, it's okay to say no with grace, but with firmness. Because the goal isn't to withdraw, it's to engage in a way that feels authentic. And once you've made peace with choosing yourself, you might find something else starts to shift. How you see your body, your reflection, and your sense of beauty. And that brings us to the next powerful realization, that authentic beauty has nothing to do with youth and everything to do with truth. 4. Embracing authentic beauty. In a world that worships youth, smooth skin, and wrinkle-free smiles, growing older can feel like stepping into the shadows. But after 70, many people begin to see what younger generations have missed entirely. That beauty was never about perfection, it was about presence. True beauty is not something you chase, it's something you allow. It shows up in the kindness behind your eyes, in the stories etched into your face, and in the quiet confidence of a person who has weathered life and emerged wiser, softer, and stronger. I once worked with a retired ballet teacher named Evelyn. She was 81. When I first met her, she covered her hands with gloves and avoided mirrors because her appearance reminded her of what she'd lost. But over time, through gentle conversation and reflection, she began to see those hands differently, not as aged, but as living evidence of decades spent guiding, nurturing, and creating. These wrinkles, she told me one day, are the choreography of my life. That moment changed her and me. You see, the lines on your face aren't flaws to be erased. They're a map of your laughter, your tears, your strength. The gray in your hair isn't a mistake. It's wisdom made visible. When you stop measuring yourself by impossible standards and start honoring the journey your body has carried you through, beauty becomes effortless. You glow, not because of what you've hidden, but because of what you've accepted. And here's what I tell every senior I work with. You are no less beautiful now than you were at 30. You are simply beautiful in a different way. So the next time you look in the mirror and hear a critical voice, pause and ask, is that my voice or someone else's echo? Then soften your gaze. Breathe. And remember, you've earned every inch of this version of yourself. Let the world chase youth. You've already found depth. And from that depth comes a clarity that very few people ever reach. And once you start seeing your worth beyond skin-deep appearances, it opens the door to another truth, that the way we spend our time also deserves to be reevaluated. Some routines may have served us once, but are they still bringing us joy today? Let's talk about that next. 5. Reevaluating activities that no longer bring joy. Life is a rhythm, a series of habits, hobbies, and routines we build over time. Many of them begin with joy, a morning walk, a weekly club, a craft we once loved. But here's the quiet truth that often surfaces after 70. What once gave us life may no longer do so. And that's not failure, it's growth. I can't tell you how many older adults I've spoken with who still participate in routines not because they enjoy them, but because they feel obligated, or even afraid of what it would mean to let go. But your time is precious now, perhaps more than ever, and you owe it to yourself to regularly ask, does this still serve me? One woman I worked with, Elaine, was 78 and still hosting her neighborhood's monthly card game. She admitted to me, I haven't enjoyed it in years, but I'd feel guilty stepping away. We talked. I encouraged her to take a short break and notice how she felt. 1 month turned into 3. In that space, she picked up watercolor painting, a hobby she had abandoned at 40 to raise her children. Her eyes lit up as she showed me her first piece, a sunrise over her backyard. That's the magic of making room for what's newly joyful, instead of clinging to what's historically familiar. Reevaluating doesn't mean disrespecting the past. It means respecting the present. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow out of things. Traditions don't have to become obligations. Routines don't have to become cages. In fact, one of the most powerful things you can do after 70 is look at your calendar and ask, what would I keep if no one expected anything of me? That question alone can lead you back to what makes you feel alive, not just occupied. So today, take inventory. What activities energize you, and what quietly drain you? What's rooted in passion, and what's running on autopilot? You deserve days that feel intentional, not just scheduled. And as you clear space in your time, something else becomes clear. The people you surround yourself with matter just as much as how you spend your time. Which leads us to the next truth. It may be time to lovingly release the relationships that are no longer healthy or life-giving. 6. Cutting ties with toxic relationships. Not every relationship is meant to last a lifetime. Some are seasonal, some are situational, and some, though painful to admit, become toxic over time. After 70, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is the freedom to step away from the connections that leave you feeling smaller, unseen, or constantly depleted. For decades, many of us have tolerated criticism, manipulation, or emotional neglect in the name of family duty, long-standing friendship, or societal pressure. But with age comes a certain kind of wisdom, and with wisdom comes permission. Permission to choose peace over loyalty, health over history. I once worked with a man named Robert, 75 years old, who had spent years maintaining weekly phone calls with a sibling who constantly belittled him. Every Sunday, without fail, he would hang up feeling anxious, angry, and ashamed. But he's my brother, Robert would say. What kind of man walks away from family? And I told him gently, the kind of man who chooses to live with dignity. When Robert finally limited those calls and set a boundary, the effect was visible within weeks. His mood lifted. He began engaging more joyfully with friends. He slept better. He smiled more. Because emotional toxicity doesn't just affect your heart, it affects your whole being. Letting go doesn't have to mean dramatic goodbyes or burning bridges. Sometimes, it simply means stepping back with grace, creating distance, saying less, showing up less often, and allowing your emotional landscape to heal. Toxic relationships often masquerade as normal when you've been in them long enough, but but you know in your body when something isn't right. You feel it in the tightening of your chest, the dread before a visit, the sigh when you hang up the phone. You deserve relationships that feel safe, mutual, and nourishing. Ones where your energy is lifted, not drained. And if someone repeatedly brings you harm, whether through words, actions, or silence, you are not obligated to keep handing them the key to your inner peace. Ask yourself today, who brings out the best in me? Who consistently brings me stress, shame, or self-doubt? Be honest. And be brave. Because what you release makes space for something better. And speaking of release, there's another silent thief of joy we must talk about. It's not a person, but a habit. A habit we've been conditioned into our whole lives, comparing ourselves to others. Let's talk about that next. 7. Letting go of comparisons. Comparison is the silent thief of joy, especially in our later years. Whether it's watching a neighbor travel the world, seeing a friend surrounded by grandchildren, or scrolling through highlight reels of other people's lives, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, they're doing better than I am. But here's what I've learned from more than a decade working with older adults. Everyone's journey is different, and the timeline for peace, purpose, or happiness is not universal. I remember meeting a couple, Jim and Rosa, both in their late 70s. They often compared themselves to their next-door neighbors, retired professionals who seemed to have it all: the luxury car, the remodeled kitchen, the perfect holiday photos. Jim once said to me, "Sometimes I feel like we failed. We rent. We never traveled much. Our kids moved away." But as we unpacked their life story, something beautiful emerged. Decades of small acts of kindness, deep community involvement, and love that had endured hardship, illness, and loss. I looked them in the eye and said, "Your wealth isn't in square footage, it's in soul depth." That changed something in them. Here's the truth. You will always find someone who has more, or seems happier, or looks healthier. But what you don't see are the silent struggles behind the scenes. You don't see their regrets, their illnesses, their private heartbreaks. When you compare your life to someone else's highlight reel, you dishonor the full depth of your own story. Letting go of comparison isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming the value of your unique experience. It's about waking up and saying, "What I've lived, what I've endured, and what I've learned, it matters." When you stop measuring your joy against someone else's milestones, you start noticing the small miracles in your own life again. The laughter over a shared cup of tea, the peace of an afternoon nap, the sunlight on your favorite chair. So ask yourself, where in my life am I quietly measuring myself against someone else's standards? And what would it feel like to put down the measuring stick and pick up gratitude instead? Because when you stop trying to live someone else's story, you're finally free to rewrite your own. And as we begin to write that new chapter, it's time to revisit one more idea that may need rewriting too: our definition of success itself. What are your goals now? And are they still truly yours? 8. Redefining goals. What truly matters now? Once you stop comparing your path to someone else's, you begin to see your life through a clearer lens. And that's when a deeper question emerges. What am I really striving for now? In earlier decades, many of our goals were shaped by pressure: build a career, buy a home, raise a family, earn a certain income. These goals weren't wrong, but they were often borrowed from what society told us mattered. And now, after 70, it's time to ask honestly, do those goals still reflect who I am today, or are they simply echoes of who I used to be? I worked with a man named Harold, who had spent his life climbing the corporate ladder. At 75, even in retirement, he still kept his resume updated and tracked the net worth of his former colleagues. When I asked him what made him feel most alive, he paused and said, "I don't know. I've been chasing success so long, I forgot to define it for myself." That moment broke something open and also set something free. Over the next year, Harold shifted his focus entirely. He spent more time gardening, joined a local storytelling group, and began writing letters to his grandchildren about the lessons life had taught him. "I used to chase titles," he told me. "Now I just want to leave behind something real." This is what redefining your goals looks like. It's not about giving up, it's about evolving. It's about releasing the outdated narrative that says you have to keep proving yourself, even in retirement. It's about giving yourself permission to value peace over productivity, meaning over milestones. So I invite you to reflect, gently, honestly, what goals are still worth pursuing? Which ones feel heavy, inherited, or no longer true? You don't have to chase the same dreams forever. You're allowed to rewrite them. In fact, you're encouraged to. Because the measure of a well-lived life isn't how much you've achieved by someone else's clock. It's how aligned you feel with the moment you're in right now. And speaking of alignment, there's one final shift that often unlocks the deepest transformation of all. It's not just about changing what you do, but finally allowing yourself to feel joy without guilt. And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. 9. Prioritizing your happiness without guilt. Once you've redefined your goals, something even more personal begins to surface. The quiet but persistent question, am I allowed to feel happy now, just for me? For much of our lives, especially as caregivers, parents, and providers, we're conditioned to put everyone else first. We equate selflessness with virtue. We learn to delay joy, minimize our needs, and apologize for even wanting something just for ourselves. But after 70, that script no longer serves you. In fact, it's time to rewrite it completely. Because your happiness isn't selfish, it's essential. I once sat with a woman named Ruth, age 79, who confessed that she felt guilty for taking afternoon naps and spending money on art supplies. I could be doing something more useful, she said. I looked at her and asked, useful to who? Her eyes welled with tears. It was the first time she had realized she'd been measuring her worth solely by what she could give to others. But you are not just a helper, a caretaker, a support system. You are a soul, a person, a presence that deserves restoration, pleasure, and fulfillment. When you begin to prioritize your happiness, not someday, not if there's time left, but now, you change the entire energy of your life. Your joy becomes contagious. Your health improves. Your relationships deepen. You stop existing on autopilot and start living with intention. Take that walk. Eat that dessert. Learn that new skill. Or simply sit in silence, letting the sun warm your face without needing to justify it. Ask yourself, what brings me joy? Not convenience, not approval, but real joy. Then ask, why haven't I made more space for that? Let go of the guilt. It's not yours to carry anymore. You've given so much of yourself to the world. Now it's time to give something back to you. Because when you allow yourself to feel happy without guilt, you unlock the purest form of freedom. And when joy and freedom live in your heart together, something powerful happens. You begin to live lightly, with presence, with peace, and with purpose. And that brings us to the most important truth of all. This isn't just a list of what to let go of, it's an invitation. An invitation to embrace life as it is, and to live the years ahead not as a fading chapter, but as the most honest, most joyful one yet. OUTRO, embrace the lightness of later life. So here we are, after walking through the 9 things that no longer make sense after 70, you might be feeling something stir inside you. A quiet recognition, a gentle invitation, maybe even a sigh of relief. Because deep down, you've always known that life isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when and what to let go. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means making room. Room for peace, for clarity, for moments that feel honest, not heavy. You've carried so much. Expectations, guilt, clutter, outdated roles, relationships that drained you. And now, perhaps for the first time in a long time, you get to ask, what if I don't have to carry all of that anymore? You see, aging isn't about becoming less. It's about becoming more aligned with what truly matters. It's about honoring the version of you that doesn't need to prove anything, please anyone, or keep chasing what never really fed your soul. It's about choosing joy without guilt, simplicity without shame, and presence without apology. In my years working with older adults, I've watched people come alive in ways they never imagined, not in their 30s or 40s, but in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. Why? Because they finally gave themselves permission to live lighter, to stop managing everyone else's comfort and start prioritizing their own truth. So I ask you now, lovingly and honestly, which of these 9 things are you ready to release today? Which one has weighed you down the longest? Leave a comment and share it, not just for you, but for someone else who needs the courage to let go too. Your voice matters. Your story can open doors for others. And if this video spoke to something in you, if it helped you feel seen, understood, or simply less alone, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. This is more than a video. It's a movement toward freedom, authenticity, and aging with intention. Because the truth is, your later years aren't the end of your story. They're the chapter where everything becomes lighter, clearer, and and more deeply yours. You're not fading, you're rising. And this is just the beginning.